The Big Ten East is Ohio State versus everyone else. Can anyone stop Ohio State in this division? Can anyone stop them in the entire Big Ten, for that matter? The Buckeyes have really dominated the Big Ten now for several years, and this year it feels like they're clearly the best team again. But will they win the East, or will they be a surprise team? I think there are a couple teams that could maybe give them a challenge. But we're going to start at the bottom here. We're going to start with Michigan State. I have Michigan State finishing at the bottom of the Big Ten. It seems kind of crazy to think about Michigan finishing below Maryland, below Rutgers, but I just really don't feel like Michigan State's going to have a good year this year. I think they win a couple of conference games. They go 2-7. They go 4-8 overall, but they have to play Miami in the non-conference, and it's going to be a tough schedule for them. Getting to a bowl game, I think, is going to be a pretty big challenge. I think they beat Nebraska at home. I think they beat Maryland at home, so they'll win a couple of games. Purdue is a winnable game. Rutgers is a winnable game. Both of those games are on the road. I've got them losing those two games. So for me, I've got Michigan State here finishing last in the Big Ten East. Actually, a tie with Rutgers. I have Rutgers also at 2-7, 5-7 overall. I think they win all of their non-conference games. And it comes down to the tiebreaker. I have Rutgers beating Michigan State. They've got them at home. For Michigan State, it's really a lot about Rutgers and Maryland just being better, and it makes this division a little bit tougher. Whereas Rutgers was once an easy win, almost a guaranteed win. Now this team is starting to look a little bit better, and I think Rutgers will win a couple of games. I think they still come out just a little bit short on a bowl game. I don't think they can quite get to that point, but 5-7 is still an improving year for them. They're getting better. I do have them beating Temple and Syracuse in the non-conference, so not quite a bowl game, but still a solid year for Michigan State. Just ahead of them, we have Maryland. I've got Maryland making it to a bowl game, going 6-6 overall, 3-6 in the Big Ten. I think they're going to have a really good offense. I expect them to be able to score a lot of points. Defense might be a little bit of a liability for them, but I think that they beat West Virginia. I've got them beating West Virginia at home in the non-conference. That'll be a tough one. West Virginia is going to be pretty good this year. I also have them upsetting Iowa. I think they beat Michigan late in the year. I've got them beating Rutgers. So I think they win some pretty big games this year. But then you look at the rest of the schedule, and it's pretty tough. I have them losing to Illinois, but perhaps they win that game. Maybe they lose to Michigan. It could go a number of different ways. But at the end of the day, my prediction for Maryland: 6-6, 3-6 in the Big Ten, enough to get to a bowl game. Ahead of them, I have Michigan. We did our full predictions on most of the top teams. We did Ohio State, Indiana, Penn State, Michigan. You can go watch those videos for more details on my predictions and kind of how I have the season going. But I do have Michigan going 6-6. I think towards the end of the year, this team, I think it's going to kind of go downhill for them. We might see the end of the Jim Harbaugh era this year. The talent's there, the roster's there. I just don't believe in the coaching staff. I just don't. I know they made some changes, but I don't think it's going to really matter. I think it's going to be a pretty bad year for Michigan. I mean, not as bad as last year, but still, I think they finish middle of the pack here in the Big Ten East. 4-5 in the conference, 6-6 overall. It's still enough to get to a bowl game. They had a losing record last year. But it's very tough to predict with Michigan. It's a team that has potential to be a 9-3 type team, but they could even go 5-7. And a big part of this is also just because of their schedule. They play a really tough schedule. They've got Wisconsin out of the West. They also have to play Washington, who I'm really high on in the non-conference. So for me, Michigan, it's a bowl game, but that's about it for them. Then I have Penn State at number 3. I think Penn State bounces back this year. They have a pretty good year, 9-3 overall, 6-3 in the Big Ten. I do have them beating Auburn at home in the non-conference. I think their losses are going to be to Wisconsin on the road, Iowa on the road, and Ohio State on the road. Those are 3 really tough road games. I do have them beating Michigan. I think they beat Michigan State on the road. And I have them beating Indiana. I think they get revenge against the Hoosiers. So Penn State there at number 3. They get revenge on Indiana, but I do think Indiana will finish ahead of them in the standings. I'm really high on this Indiana team. A lot of people saying that this team is overrated, that Indiana is overrated. I don't think so. I think this team is legit. I really love their head coach and just the culture that he has brought to Indiana. Defensively, they've been pretty solid. They haven't been great, but they've been pretty solid. And you got Michael Penix back at quarterback. They brought in some transfers as well that I think are really going to make that offense even more explosive. I think this team's able to get to 10-2. I really feel like it's going to be a great year for them. We've seen them getting closer and closer, and I think this year they finally break through and have a great season. I have them beating Ohio State. I think they pull off a big upset. I do think they lose the opener to Iowa, and then I have them losing to Penn State on the road, but I do have them beating Cincinnati, upsetting Ohio State, beating Michigan on the road. I think it's going to be a big year for Indiana. Not quite enough to get to the Big Ten championship, but still enough to get right there at number 2 and pull off that big upset over Ohio State. That's the only game I have Ohio State losing. I have them at 11-1, 8-1 in the Big Ten. I think they lose somewhere. Maybe it's not Indiana. Maybe they lose somewhere else. But I feel like Ohio State's going to lose a game this year. They're going to be pretty young, have a new quarterback. Great skill position players around him. Assuming it's C.J. Stroud or whoever the quarterback is, they're going to have great skill around him, great offensive line. So I think the offense will still be good. But it's still, you got a young quarterback. You never know. Might make some mistakes in a big game. But it's really the defense. It's the secondary. That's where I'm a little bit worried about Ohio State. The linebackers as well. I think that's going to be an issue. And when you go up against a really explosive passing attack like Indiana's, maybe it catches up to them. Maybe they lose a game. So I've got Ohio State still winning the East, but I do have them losing one game. It's an 11-1 regular season finish for Ohio State. But again, still winning the Big Ten East.